WitchLit is on a summer hiatus while we settle into our new WitchLit HQ, and rather than leave a blank space in the feed, we're taking the old TV network approach and bringing you some summer reruns from our first 2 seasons. Today's re-release is my conversation with Dr. Alexander Cummins. We talked about a number of his previous books and his then upcoming book, Nazareth, Pillars of Gladness, or a geomancer's angelical psalter of calls containing vessels 19 with which to water the earth, because we love the early modern full paragraph book titles that tell you exactly what the book contains. He offers many courses on his website, alexandercummins.com, and will be presenting at the Salem Witchcraft and Folklore Festival in August. We'll be back with new episodes beginning next week on August 2nd. Welcome to Season 2 of WitchLit, a space to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. Hi, it's producer Victoria, jumping in to celebrate and marvel that this is the last episode of Season 2. I hope you're having as much fun as I am meeting new authors. If you're a writer of witchy or magical things and you'd like to be on the show, you can fill out the form on the website at witchlitpod.com, or you can email me directly, victoria@witchlitpod.com. We've set up a Patreon. There are links in the show notes. If you'd like to get episodes early, discounts at 1000 Volt Press, a free book, and the opportunity to submit your own question for our tiny game of chance. I'm recording Season 3 now, and I think you'll be excited for our upcoming guests and new bonus episodes where I bring back a previous guest to talk about a witchy classic. AJ Scuderi is joining me for a special Samhain chat about John Updike's 1984 novel, The Witches of Eastwick. I wanted to give you a bit of a heads up so you can read the book and enjoy the episode spoiler-free if you'd like. We'll see you back here for the first interview of Season 3 with Storm Fairywolf on October 12th. Dr. Alexander Cummins is a contemporary cunning man and historian of magic. His magical specialties are the dead, folk necromancy, divination, geomancy, and the grimoires. His published works include an excellent book of the art of magic with Phil Lagarde, The Starry Rubric, a book of magi, lore, prayers, and spellcraft of the 3 Holy Kings, and several chapbooks, as well as essays and collections by Three Hands Press, Hadean Press, and Scarlet Imprint. He is a frequent speaker on the international circuit, co-hosts the podcast Radio Free Golgotha, and is a founding editor of Revelore Press's Folk Necromancy and Transmission series. Dr. Cummins' work, classes, and services can be found at his website, alexandercummins.com. Dr. Cummins, welcome to WitchLit.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I am so excited to have you on the show. I always joke that I try not to fangirl too much when I get folks on that I'm really excited to have, but I will just warn you now, there may be fangirling that happens.
Well, that's fun. Hopefully we can find something we can fangirl out about together as well.
Excellent. Excellent.
Facing the same direction, all that kind of thing.
So our first question for everyone is, in the sea of all the ways to communicate now, why write?
I was really enjoying that you gave me a little hint of like the kinds of questions we go for. So I was going through those kinds of things. I reflected the other day when we were talking about, I was talking to a friend of mine about something and remembered that I had written a chapter in an anthology about it, or I'd mentioned it in this chapter I'd written. And I was like, oh, great. I don't have to remember it anymore. I exclaimed. And so I sometimes wonder if at least some publishing and writing for me is about, what they say about like handbags. It's like externalized memory of some kind. It's a way that I can try and have a stab at something and get it clear in my head, and then have something to get back to when I've cleared my head and now can only remember, the theme tune from Gummy Bears or something like that. Like, I can look it up. Books are a particularly portable magic, right? That's Stephen King, I think, right? And I think being able to put a pin in your thoughts, not just express like this is the definitive thought on 17th century astrology or what have you, but to be able to put a pin in where you're at with your own analysis and your own picking things apart and putting them back together again, and be able to be like, because in reading your own work like that, when you've forgotten the the quote or the author or something, and you pull it out, you're like, oh, a lot more comes back to me now, and I remember where I was at when I was doing it. So there's a mnemonic thing to it, but it's also helpful for getting my thoughts clear. I think that's probably a long-winded way of getting to a short answer there.
Did you always write, or did that kind of come with studying in academia?
I think so. I've remarked before, being, politely asked about what kind of childhood leads to this kind of to this kind of life, at least to be tried as an adult. And for me, I think an important part is growing up playing Dungeons and Dragons with my dad and his friends when I was like 4. Which earns me huge credit with the formal stuffy ceremonial magicians. They're very impressed by that. Certainly writing on character sheets, certainly like writing up adventures, the like campaigns we'd been on as like short stories and things like that. I was an after school drama nerd. So I guess there was always an element of them being linked to some kind of performance as well, whether that was like speaking them aloud or, again, the collaborative storytelling of tabletop role-playing games is, I think, a really big deal and made a big impact in me in terms of like, what I would later read about as like improv prompts and being able to like yes and people and it's a game where the players aren't necessarily, again, certain PvP might be, but on the whole, you're not battling, your family trying to win at Monopoly against them, right? You're ideally you're a party that is like going out and like having quests and going on adventures and finding magical items and committing extreme acts of violence, all the things that bring a family and friends together, right?
Yes. Oh, no, I love that. And it's funny how many writers I've talked to also are currently D&D players or former D&D players. I think it is a little bit of a thread there, especially in this space when you're writing about magic and witches and magicians. So
yeah, I think so. I mean, I also grew up, I'm a mid 80s baby, and there was a huge, wonderful emphasis on trying to actually teach the junior school and the like infant school that I was part of trying to teach. It was a very diverse community and place and full of kids from all over the world. And so a real 80s effort was made, especially after a bunch of riots and things, to teach like West African mythology, as well as Greek mythology, as well as the classic like Hellenized Western stuff. Like, so growing up with mythology from around the world was also like a huge inspiration, as well as, trawling through monster manuals and things like that, and learning maths from the Thaco system and things. So yeah, I think looking at how stories affect people and how they shape culture as well as kind of cohere it was really significant. The first time I stepped on stage was in a little school play to play Anansi, the West African spider deity, trickster, that my mum made an awesome costume, which is just like a black leotard with extra tights with newspaper stuffed in them, and then put on see-through elastic on my wrists. So I had like these extra limbs.
Nice.
Yeah, so I feel very lucky about like having had a great kickstart in terms of, learning collaborative play and improv skills, if you like, and also, being doused in this, warm bath of world mythology.
Mm-hmm. So does this prove correlation, if not causation, that D&D actually makes you a wizard?
Oh, living chick track come to life, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think the proportion of, I've been thinking about this because I'm gearing up to do some kind of, to take a talk on the road at some point to various gaming stores about magic for gamers, basically. And I've been thinking about this in terms of, I think most occultists have probably thrown some polyhedral dice now and then. I think they're a corruptible market. I'm not sure it's the other way around. I think less gamers are interested in the occult, and a lot of friends who are like, look, if I can't throw an actual fireball, if we're going to talk about like the mental process behind why I want to throw a fireball and turn it into self-help, it doesn't interest me anymore.
Yeah.
Which is fair. I think it's important that, that we know the difference between myth and fact and can see the value in both without confusing one for the other. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I've talked about that with fiction writers that, magic in fiction especially is that special effects gaming magic. It's not, there are very few authors who write like books about magic that are what we would call actual magic.
Yeah.
It's not as exciting in fiction.
It's also a favorite game I've found of like occultists and witches to be like, when a new series comes out with some magic in it, the people are like, oh, that was an actual Enochian word. I think someone's done their research. That's like Sabrina and the list of dead witches from Wikipedia just being listed off in order in the litany. Yeah, that's interesting to me. Which authors do you think do a really good job of writing about magic in fiction in a way that like rings true for you?
I don't know. I noticed in I think is it in the Four Kings book that you cite Deborah Harkness's John Dee book?
Yeah.
Because I think Discovery of Witches has a lot of that because she is a historian of magic and alchemy and all of that. So I think there is a lot of reality in her books that I appreciate.
Yeah. I think that's a good in having a grounded like historical context for this thing, like how it was practiced, the people doing it, and that's certainly the area of magic I'm more interested in, both in terms of historical study and my own practice of being called a contemporary cunning man, of looking at the service magicians who are looking after, the local spirit workers and wise women and village wizards who are, turning a different kind of trick, but equally for various trade and for needs and occasionally like desperation and things. So I'm interested in where it landed and what it was for, and how it what it helped with and things like that. In terms of fiction writers that write well about magic, I've been listening to the audiobooks of the Rivers of London series by Aaron Aronovich. Really like them. Really like them.
So good. They're so good. Yeah.
Cobner Holbrook Smith reads brilliantly. It's like great voices. I can't read them now without like hearing how he does Nightingale.
It's his voice in my head, definitely.
Yeah. They're great, right? And his stuff on Newtonian magic is really interesting, especially like later books where he starts to talk about cunning craft and how the Newtonian magic in this world with Isaac Newton like formalizing magic with his second Principia. It formalizing from a bunch of like earlier ritual magic, and how that one of the recent books is about like what happens when the church start doing that stuff as well. Can the church do magic too? And the Spanish Inquisition specifically. But his notion of like the forms and wisdoms of the way he talks about from the first book where Peter, our protagonist, our first person narrator, learns that magic is real by having to take a statement from a ghost as a like a PC on his beat, and so as Peter learns throughout the books, you're learning throughout the books as well, and so they reveal little bits and pieces. And the idea of like having to keep certain forms and visualizations in one's head at the same time as doing a bunch of other things does a good job towards certainly like post Golden Dawn style like ceremonial magic stuff.
And I love in the most recent book the blacksmiths, the women that kind of got pushed out of the original Newtonian magic. It was a brilliant sideline. I was like, okay, are you setting me up for this series? Because I want it.
Right, the quote Sons of Wayland. Yeah. That was awesome. And was it the other one, the Society of the Rose? But they're like, how do you know about that? Yeah. No, he's expanded the world brilliantly. The oh my gosh, I was so impressed with what Abigail did last summer as well. Especially in that, like, how do you, as I don't know how old he is, like, as a middle-aged, at least white passing dude, write a teenage, Black British girl. Mm-hmm. And so putting the footnotes in when she gets to London slang of Post Martin, being a very, very funny, like 90-year-old librarian being like, I believe Abigail is referring to, like, yeah, that was done very well. Also, amazing haunted house story that just keeps giving, right? Mm-hmm. The house is changing and is like, what's haunted about the house? That this isn't a typical haunting, that the house is rifling through people's memories in various interesting ways, that there's a dead magician in the house that doesn't know that they're dead yet. Like layers and layers and layers of things. So a rich onion of haunting.
Yeah, I want to talk about a fangirl moment is if I can get him on the show. That'll be a fangirl moment.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. I bet he will.
I mean, he seems so affable, but I am very impressed. My husband, I turned my husband onto the books, and he is a Black man from the Caribbean, and he said the same thing. He goes, I'm so impressed with, because he lived in London, and he was like, this is so true to like being a Black person in London and growing up in that. I mean, he didn't grow up in London, but so many Trinidadians are in London. There's a whole community there. And he really, though I guess Peter's mom is from Sierra Leone, there's that sense of community building. He just gets it all right. So
yeah. No, they're great. Yeah, been very much enjoying those.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. So now that we've talked about other people publishing their books and we broached the subject, how did publishing work for you? Like, what was that arc or journey like for you?
Honestly, without like too much false humility, I always worry when people ask, when like prospective authors, we've had a drink or something and I've met them at a conference or something, they're like, how do I get into this? I did it by accident. I sent my master's by research thesis, which is on functions of astrology in 17th century England, to my mate Jake, because I knew he was interested in the stuff. He passed it on to his publishers. So the first I knew was Urs and Dis of Hadean Press being like, hey, we found your thesis and we want to publish it, which I'm told is exactly how this doesn't work most of the time. Right. I guess it's a small world, and I've been going to conferences and meeting people and going for drinks and stuff. So I guess that's technically networking, but I always think of it as just genuinely trying to make friends with nice people and do good work together. So the first dipping my toe, other than putting out like little EPs with the various punk bands I was in ourselves, if that counts as self-publishing, was the Starry with what turned into the Starry Rubric, which is an expansion of my master's by research thesis. And then from there, it was talking to the people and so every project has been has cohered kind of a little differently. I worked on the excellent book with Phil for a good sort of 5 years on and off, of just kind of batting bits back and forth, him finding more manuscripts that showed that, the Azazel, Keeper of the Bones working, particular kind of, seems a genre of like necromantic rite that we get in a little bit 15th, but definitely 16th and 17th century Europe and England especially, seems a lot more predominant than we thought. Kept finding more evidence, so we kept folding back into it, and I kept expanding the historiography and that. So that went on as long as it needed to. And so I've been very lucky to have met really cool, understanding, knowledgeable, and experienced publishers who are also invested in not just the historical study of magic, but also its promulgation and kind of practice and development. And so, I've been very lucky to meet excellent scholar practitioners and publishers. So that's the short answer.
You'd be surprised how many people I've talked to that kind of fell into publishing. Like it does seem to happen. I don't think it's the usual, but I do think it happens a lot. Yeah.
Well, I get, now I help edit a folk necromancy imprint for Revelor Press with my good friend Jesse and Jen. And so I also get the like scoping for talent, like keeping an ear to the ground about like, that was a really cool talk. I wonder if they're thinking about publishing it. I wonder, like, we'd love to publish that. So I also get the other side now of like, looking for work to do with people. And that's also exciting. So it's nice seeing it being on the other side of it and being able to pass that on and to reach out to people who are like, is anyone interested in this? Like, yes, yeah, we are. And we think a bunch of other people will be actually.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I came to your work through the podcast and then through your classes. And so I came to your actual writing kind of late, kind of, I guess, backwards from how, thinking of you as an author. But one of the things I noticed in reading, like the Starry Rubric, is though it is an academic text, it's not impenetrable. Like, I think a lot of academic writing, I don't know that it's intentionally impenetrable, but it often is impenetrable. And you have such a fluid style in that book, which is now 10 years old.
Something like that. Gosh. Wow. Yeah.
And then the newest thing that I'd read was the pamphlet you did on the Four Kings mirror.
Oh, the Arts of Britain. Yeah. The Mirror of Four Kings. Yeah. And
your writing has, I think, evolved. I kind of want to ask you this question in a roundabout way. I guess first proving that I read your stuff.
No. This is making my little lonely author's heart very, very warm. Thank you.
Well, good. Yeah. But that in the Cyprian King's book, your writing is, again, it's very fluid, but also like your voice has come out more, I think, because just from having classes with you, like you have this great way of, you have this great turn of analogies that take something that is very esoteric and sometimes use like a very modern pop culture thing or something to kind of get your point across in a way that's crystal clear to your audience or your reader. And so I think that's even more involved in the books. But what is that like writing for you? Like writing what is very academic work, heavily researched, all this stuff kind of outside of academia. Like, how does that work for you?
That's a lovely opportunity to get to talk about this, because that's something that's weighed on me since since graduating from more big school and getting my doctorate, trying to both understand the gifts and the training and the sharpened approach and the familiarity with resources and libraries and access and things like that. All of the benefits that further education have provided me, and that my supervisors and colleagues and tutors furnished me with. I'm very grateful to them. Mm-hmm. But gradually learning that I don't just want to write academic texts, even well-written academic texts. I want to get at the practice of things. And so I feel like each of my books from Starry Rubric, which again was adapted and expanded, but was mostly literally a master's thesis, to then a master's by research. Like the most time I spent with anyone else doing a master's was graduation day. I sat in a library and wrote and met with my supervisor and, got crazy and mad scientist hair, and then disappeared for a week and wrote it all down. So moving away from a purely academic tone and approach. And so thank you for raising the Art of Cyprian's Mirror of Four Kings, because that was a very deliberate endeavor. And the reason it's a pamphlet and a chapbook is that I wanted to put out, here is this operation. So this is historical material. Here is me, as best I can, talking through how I attempted to work the magic of this thing without trying to impose how I did it on how you might do it. This to me is a bigger pedagogical tension, but I think we see it played out explicitly in how personal and intimate magic and the conjuration of spirits especially can get. How do I show you how you can do your magic without it being a cargo cult version of watching me do mine? When is stirring the bowl in that particular way just the best way to stir a bowl? What can I pick up from you when you do your magic? And I can be like, that's a cool thing. And I'm not overreaching or doing something I don't understand or pretending to be someone else or pretending to have access to things I don't. That's just the best way to stir a pot or the best way to mop a floor or whatever it is, or to chalk a circle or whatever it is, versus when is it about the choices you need to make and the boundaries you need to assert or reinforce, or the unknown that you want to step into, So the wider pedagogy of how to talk about what you're doing in order to show other people that they can do it too, without putting a huge trademark me thing on it, or attempting to own it or something terrible like that. So the pamphlet was absolutely an experiment in, and it's why there are like appendices of like, oh hey, I also use this, the silken cloths from the Key of Solomon. So here's that in an appendix. Oh, there are a bunch of extra psalms that it recommends you say. Here are those psalms in case you don't have it to hand. And so it was nice to be able to put together something very short. It's a pamphlet, right? That was on something concise and that also showed as well as told what I was up to, but hopefully not in a way that looked like, territorial whittlings on something. Again, how do you inspire people and get them excited about their own practice rather than just, doing the lodge magic equivalent of like, oh, we've got a secret, or we've got secret masters. And if you, for a low payment of your soul, or, $9.99 for the rest of your initiations, you too can have access to this secret. Like, how do you show people that they can get at it themselves without just encouraging them to fly off the deep end and do whatever they want and make things up and do either ineffectual magic that they've convinced themselves is somehow good or effective or worthwhile, or something, outright dangerous occasionally.
Mm-hmm. So what was that? I mean, like when you were still, I assume that you were practicing when you were in school, when you were still studying at university. Mm-hmm. So what was that like being a practitioner of what you're studying? Because usually there's this like separation of the academic and the practical. How did that play in academia, that you also were a practitioner, not just a researcher?
Mostly during, people weren't too fussed because, it's not relevant to bring up to, if you're talking about like, we've all read this, 17th century account of something. It's not really relevant to bring up like, oh, I tried this on the weekend. Like that doesn't, no one's that bothered about it. And this is a wider thing that I felt amongst the many skills and opportunities and privileges and things. This is something that I did feel I had to, I'm still feeling like I have to unlearn from historian training, which is that like, historians are a bit like documentary filmmakers being like, oh, I don't get involved in the story. Mm-hmm. I just tell the truth. Whereas you're the one that decides which truth to tell and what camera to point at. So like you're a massive part of that. You don't stand outside of history, my friend. And so, getting out of this mindset of like, no one cares what you think. No one cares what you do. Like we care what dead people did. And now as a necromancer, that's also super useful for me. And so seeing how one set of skills is transferable has been wonderful. On the whole, I found it fine. There was certainly while I was doing it, there was a huge, there was like an extended version of, is it Pratchett that says like, if you just tell people you're doing a school project, they'll let you do anything as a kid. It was like an extension of that to say like, oh, I was at like university studying the history of magic. People were like, even if they thought that was ridiculous, they were amused by it, right? Yeah. You're non-threatening, right? Oh, you're just studying a thing. Mm-hmm. That's cool. And they could impose their own conceptual distance of like, oh, I'm sure he doesn't actually believe in this stuff. Having graduated and starting going to things, that was where, being like, I've done research on this, and I'm also interested in, I'm also interested in seeing how this plays out in our actual lives and helps us or doesn't. And again, I think there are useful comparisons to, you can go to church history stuff without spouting sermons at people. Your religious life is your own and might not be shameful, but you might want to keep, private. That's not relevant to the discussion of this, historical material, right. What have you. So I think it's been, I'm very grateful for the friends and colleagues I've made along the way, both practitioners and non-practitioners. And I've generally felt very supported and encouraged by the people I've ended up, hanging around with. But that's also because I've encountered a bunch of people who weren't terribly supportive, that I didn't want to work with anymore. Right. Yeah.
So do you think there is a difference between how like the study of magic or practicing magic is received in British academia versus American academia?
Yeah, I actually think I think American academics of magic in general are a lot more valent to things that get called quote new religious movements and things like that. In certainly my experience of the last couple of conferences I was at. Gosh, yes, you hear stories of various American professors of the history of magic recommending dream incubation techniques to try out, so that their students can understand a little bit more about like what the process of these people we're studying went through, like kind of gonzo historianship, right? In the same way one might in the same way one might learn to do up hair, or like the Romans did, and discover that they were actually embroidering it, or actually learn to spin thread. Like in learning these skills, we get. I think there's an important set of contexts, and for me, it gets a little necromantic in terms of doing the things that the ancestors and forebears did, and stepping into the same patterns of moving in the same way of I don't just think for me, it's not really a reconstructionism to do those things so much as it's like doing it now as they did it in their now. Brings us close together. Means that we can face the same direction more easily. But also, I think certainly in my anecdotal experience, I've heard British academics of magic say, well, the thing about spirits is that they're ultimately imperceptible. Like you can never actually tell there's a spirit around or not. And a bunch of American academics, not even practitioners, academics being like, then why are there so many operations in this like working book for how to see spirits or how to perceive spirits? Why are there so many detailed instructions in so many scrying books about like how to, like what kind of thing shadowy in the stone counts and doesn't count? Like the idea that they are fundamentally imperceptible and we're like treating them like black holes or something is ridiculous. And this American academic stood up and said that, and it was great because that's again, we can talk about emic and etic perspectives, but like when you are making a statement about the nature of spirits, and there's a bunch of practitioners in the room, like you look daft, frankly. Like
like you haven't done your research is what you're telling me.
Yeah, and not just like haven't read the right books or don't have the cool grimoires on your shelf, bound in bat scrotum or what have you, but like that the idea is still fundamentally that what we study the history of magic to understand why people be so cray. Right. This is the other thing I've been disappointed about in terms of my doctoral research was on the history of magic and the emotions. And at the time, it was like a field I was very, very excited about. And I still am. But an awful lot of cultural historians are coming together and being like, oh, we've got this emotionology stuff and this like, cultural scripts of emotion and things like that. Looking at how different cultures kind of socially construct what it is to express grief or love or courtship or shame or blah, 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 right? Then you've got a bunch of like social historians being like, the history of emotion, and its constructivity changes over time. And we have these takes. We can talk about how this fits in with sociopolitical structures of power. A ton of like feminist historians like being like, oh, great, finally we're talking about the stuff that like has impacted the private lives of so many people. And one of the things that I've kind of noted is that it became another way to psychologize rather than show the nuance of how pre-modern passional theory speaks of a porous mind, body, soul, self complex that is constantly radiating and expressing out that which is put into it, that we are porous, like if we are treated angrily, like those enmattered, that overlook of anger, like whether it's the evil eye or whatever, will impact our humoral like constitutions and will also it will impact what we express, right? We are porous beings that push out the bad that is pushed into us. Right. And these are ways of understanding not just medicine or like art history or what have you, of like Melophysic man on the zodiac of whatever chapel or what have you, but it's also ways of fundamentally understanding interrelationality and affectivity of like this grand magically alive cosmos. I think it's a great model for explicating both cosmology and also the phenomenology of what it is to feel like you are part of something doing magic, and also, exploring a bunch of ideas that, the witches have been on about for a very long time around like passion fueling magic and like getting inflamed with not just prayer to the divine, but with like a sense of engagement with the world is important. And for me, sorcery and spellcraft are ways in which I can be more engaged and hopefully more responsible in the world, not just, lighting a wishing candle and abnegating responsibility and hoping it all works out, and so, yeah, I definitely felt that a lot of magic and emotion stuff didn't end up using it to enrich either of those perspectives, but ended up using it to kind of explain away the other in a specifically psychologizing away magic, which was not so helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems opposite of to look at this in such an embodied way, like through humoral theory and what shows up in a lot of your classes, and then to say, oh, this is just how we explain it.
Right. Yeah.
That seems completely opposite to me.
Yeah. It's another way that people have been crazy, but we're not crazy. They're just sensitive. Mm-hmm. Like that's for me, that's not an improvement. That's just finding a nicer word for telling people that you think they're crazy, or mm-hmm. signaling that you think people aren't rational actors. Yeah.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what, like doing the kind of research and writing that you do and being a practitioner, how do you see those things weaving together? Like, does doing the research and writing change how you practice or impact how you practice? Or does the practice more feed the writing, or is that a balance? Like how does that work in your life for you?
That's a great question. So most like my day job is reading for clients and doing occasional bits of spiritual work for people whose readings have suggested that that's helpful for them, or it's making charms or talismans or things for people, or teaching classes about those kinds of things. And so the research I'm doing to talk to people is partly prompted now from my own research. To say my main focus these days is trying to be inspired by the dead magicians I both study and conjure. Basically, like as a necromancer, like all my grimoires are necromantic, or and there's a strong component of ancestor veneration as well for me, of honoring the dead magicians that came before me, both to understand their works that I'm studying originally academically and now like professionally, as well as experimenting with how they work, and so increasingly for me, research and experimentation are kind of informing each other. And this is what people say, like the old argument about like that an academic study of it can get too armchairy, and that a experimental approach of just trying things can get too wacky and have produce too much unconfirmed personal gnosis, or whatever term we're using for making stuff up. But ideally, they're not just Goldilocksing this. Like I absolutely found that doing better research, having a better idea about like the historical context of how these things were practiced, how these people were doing it, has given me more like scope and tools to be able to conjure these dead magicians more effectively, and to work with the saints that they worked with, and to conjure from the crossroad dirts that were around in the 17th century that are still in parts of London and things like that. And so I think most people would like to have it both, right? To have your practice that's both got lots of like nice books and depth of knowledge about a thing and a little expertise even, while also not being bound by that and being able to see how contexts might be different, whether that's not being able to easily acquire eagle brains for your solar incenses anymore, or what have you. Like how do we honor our ancestors by using this stuff in a way that expands our options and potentially brings us closer together and to understand what they've done so that we can move forward. I think there's a lot for me about how, a good teacher helps their students surpass them. I think with ancestral stuff and with working with dead magicians and with practicing a kind of contemporary cunning craft from inspiration, research, practice, and experiment, and refining through divining and developing and debriefing my own kind of practice. And that's where, in part, a devotion to the three magi comes in for me, that they become this kind of umbrella figure for a variety of dead wizards and witches and wise women to kind of gather together. They're kind of United Colors of Benetton ad of supposedly being three kings from like the three kingdoms of the earth. So, hagiography has them as like being one from the Orient, one from India, one the Indies, and one from either Africa or Europe, and that they come together, and so that they're literally meant to represent like the old order of magic and all the magicians that came before us, this condensed wisdom thing. Mm-hmm. And so in writing the book about that and tracing their cultus from the from the earliest Christian catacombs all the way up to Tres Rios, as Puerto Rican pride in New York, in contemporary practice, getting to chase those camels and get some like good camel dirt, foot track dirt occasionally, that kind of thing. So yeah, I fear that was a little rambly, but that's really like I have a lot of thoughts because it's so history is necromancy and necromancy is history, and learning your magic from the dead magicians that you also study academically. Like there's a whole, I'm not quite sure how to pick at that bundle in a way that like doesn't sound like a big mess of things.
No, I mean, rambly is good. I mean, that's what podcasts are for, right? But I mean, I think, I guess what I kind of distill out of that is that, yes, the research part is important and we should honor that, but also it's not, because you are a practitioner, that is not a static dead thing. You are bringing it into your contemporary time and building on that knowledge. And that's, I think the difference between being just I'm a historian here, I'm not involved.
Right. Right. What can we actually do to make this operational? And that's where, you do find I'm not much of a fan of approaches to grimoire magic that get very purist and that say like, this is the only way you can do this because the grimoire says so, because most grimoires say all sorts of things. That's a really bad reason why not.
And they can contradict each other.
Absolutely contradict each other. The notion of purism itself, like seeing how early modern practitioners used working books, books of calls, prayer books, liturgical hours business, as well as like archconjurations, exorcisms, etc. They aren't just cherry picking whatever they want to do. It's not a anything goes approach, but it does show a modularity of like, hey, if you don't have a call to the four quarters, like grab your other book that has that. Right, that we build on what works. And so this idea of being like, I have formalized the system, which is now closed and has all of its pieces mapped out perfectly, and I do exactly the same thing every time, belies the dynamism at the core of most like conjuration of spirits I've been part of, let alone ones that seem attested in the historical record. And so for me, purism is it feels like a very recent and kind of reactionary turn towards authenticity. I'm a proper magician because I do what the book tells me, not like these other schlubs. I feel there's an element of like a bid for authenticity, which itself doesn't feel very traditional or authentic. Like, you should judge it by if it works, I think, not by if you hunted a proper, unicorn horn for your ingredients or what have you. I think there's a lot of things that distract us from how is this making our lives better? How is this or enriching our lives? Or how is this helping us help our communities, Yeah,
I do think it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that's been on my mind, partly because, I chose the title of the podcast, it's WitchLit. I've never heard you self-identify as a witch. Like that doesn't seem consistent with what I've seen in your classes and stuff that you don't necessarily identify that way. Only from what I've seen, like you totally could outside of that. But I do think that some of that purity that you were talking about, there is this kind of like fractioning in like kind of the cultures of magic users between what they call themselves and what they are, or, you know, what tradition they follow, or, you know, is it a neo-religion? Is it a continuation? Is it a picking back up of something? Like in your research and kind of like in your practice and being someone who's a very public practitioner with classes and conferences and all that, do you see that? Or like what, I guess, do you have a comment on this thing I just like vomited at you?
Yeah. I think it's very easy. And like, you know, the internet is built and popularized around a bunch of things that are designed to help us categorize ourselves and to help us compare our insides to other people's outsides. So I think there's a lot to be said for the deal we make with the devil of, you know, various social medias that I'm also part of. I don't mean to be like these damn kids.
I mean, we're all in it. I mean, we're doing a podcast right now. Yeah.
We make those, right. We make those deals with those devils. And, you know, I get to stay in touch with family that are on the Facebooks, being further away and things. But I also have to, you know, endure a bunch of things as well, and notice when I am letting myself be manipulated a little bit in my stray doom scrolling or what have you, right?
Yeah.
So I think on the one hand, the internet makes it a lot easier to feel like things are increasingly fractured and that people are, I think there's a certain, there are great strengths to working out who you are and what you are, to be able to go to the crossroads and be at least sure about how unsure you are about things. I think that's important and real. I think I've observed in American discourse, people enjoy flagging very heavily the position that they are about to argue from. Mm-hmm. Like I have a lot of friends that did philosophy degrees, and, you know, they love doing the like, okay, so to put on the anarcho-syndicalist hat, I'm about to argue from this position. And as an anarcho-syndicalist, blah, 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 right? I have a lot of time for anarcho-syndicalism. I'm not trying to bag on that, but it feels like it's part of the discourse is to reify the dialectic of it like that, to deliberately be like, well, I am this thing, and so I'm going to argue from this position. I think witches, you know, and the identification with it is a whole bunch of things that are also very culturally contingent. You know, are you talking about like Buha, where you like aren't necessary, like where we're verging into ideas around which isn't human, is something else, and what does that mean, and how does it mean for you to stand outside of those things, and what power and what tensions are being strummed on that thing, and so that one, I think it's easy to be like, don't worry about what you get called, just do your work. But it is important, right? It does matter. I get called a ceremonial, I used to get called a ceremonial magician a bunch, and it increasingly kind of like just didn't feel accurate. And so I understand what it is to want to be depicted in a way that accords with the way you think your practice actually works. I don't do a lot of like, I do some formal ceremonial stuff. But again, my stuff is mostly informed by cunning craft at this point, or learned from spirits that I summoned by cunning means. So I think witch is a special one, and it's so imbricated into a bunch of different people's reclaiming power and stating that they're not going to take any more shit. You know, that I would never like tell someone they're being daft for overly asserting that they need to be a witch. In fact, I think people should probably have more of the courage of their convictions and be like, okay, be a witch then. Like, sour some milk, you know? Because that's the other perspective I come from. You know, a lot of my work is the word for uncrossing. We do have crosses in early modern magic. We don't talk about people being crossed up so much, like you'd see like my conjure doctor colleagues from African American hoodoo or Southern conjure. but we do talk about people being bearing crosses or having crosses on them. But most uncrossing work is called unbewitching work. So again, a lot of cunning craft is about combating maleficia.
Right.
And if you treat that as so it's easy as well to get into oh, no, witches are bad. And unless you're a bad person, you shouldn't call yourself that thing. I think it's far more complicated than that. And again, I think if more people thought about maleficia and magical combat and spiritual attack as violence and as like the martial arts that you learn to attempt to de-escalate violence, then I think we'd have a lot more set of mature conversations about that kind of thing.
Yeah. It is interesting because especially because I write fiction. So in fiction, witches definitely come across as more than human, if not human. I mean, that's definitely the pop culture meme, I guess, around witches, is that they are somehow aside from regular humans. And, like as a practicing witch, like I don't identify as more than human in any way. Like I'm not, there's nothing in my DNA that makes me a witch, I guess, is the thing. Right. And then it's very tied in pop culture to like, you're a natural witch or you're a hereditary witch or whatever.
Right. Concepts of witch blood and things like that. Yeah. You've got the potential to get down some weird roads, but you also, again, need to be aware that like not all witchcrafts are the same. And when we over try and compare across the world, we risk flatlining and saying everything is pretty much, all witchcraft is basically the same around the world. Yeah. Well, is it? Like if you're coming from like a Central American perspective of like, oh, my grandmother cuts off her thumb and throws it out the window and it turns into an owl and then like chases the La Migra away, like that's a very different like kettle of fish from I go up to this particular hill and dance around naked once a year. Either of these things are less witchcraft than the other, depending on the context of the thing the cultural context and the value centers of the people exploring those things. Yeah, I think there's great strength that can be derived from being like, okay, have the courage of like when that spirit told you that you are now no longer fully human. Like if that's the experience you had, if that's the tradition or the way of working that you've engaged with, then great. Then what does it mean to stand outside of that? What can you do with that that leaves the world in a better place than where you left it, for whatever that endeavor is, whether that's helping the forests, reclaim the old ironworks or murdering, awful men who've done horrible things to women or whatever it is. Like any of these things have an option to like be the terrifying witch you wish to see in the world, it's going to depend on where you're coming from that and what you're, like they're not all going to be the same kind of practice. And so just as something, it can be empowering to feel like you are, we're into kind of totemism stuff to a certain extent. I've been doing a bunch of Raven research. And so this idea of like, more than human or other than human ancestry doesn't have to mean like, I am a god, but it can end up like producing that kind of like egomania and things like that. Outside of, people who are engaging in deep devotional relationships with their gods, that might be exactly what you are actually doing. There's a difference between doing it and folding it into a stable life and crowing about it on social media and things. So again, what empowers people, what helps them feel like they are more in their own practice? When are the stories that our spirits tell us helpful to us and give us the courage of our convictions and help us stand at the crux of difficult decisions and help us feel more engaged in things rather than like, oh, it's out of my hands. I am but a vessel of the goddess or what have you. And when are you a vessel of the goddess? And I here we're into sorcery and religion stuff. When do you make the decision and like, I will deal with the consequences? And when are you like, you know what? I am not on my best right now, and I could probably do with some help from something bigger than me, or like wanting to feel like I'm contributing to something more than me. So it very much depends whether people are talking about, their witchcraft as their spiritual engagement, as their religious practice, as their social taboo, as their political label. John Hayden says the witch is a rebel in, the witch is a rebel in physic, as the rebel is a witch in law, right? The phrase that gets used a lot, and connecting up like rebellion and witchcraft fundamentally.
I mean, they do socially seem to go hand in hand. I mean, I do think there is like a wave of witchiness that seems to happen when socially things are not great.
Yeah. There's been a little bit of kickback amongst various like historians of esoterica or the esoteric of late, which is to say that like it might be as accurate to say that there are also a lot of, in times of hardship, there are lots of articles about how people are resorting to witchcraft more than they are. There's a lot more attention paid to it versus like, oh, no one was doing this 10 years ago. Like
correlation, not causation.
Right. We've always been here. It's just that now you care. You know, there's
now
that
you're paying attention. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it is, you know. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But absolutely, I think that should inform and show not just desperation makes strange bedfellows or no atheists in foxholes. I think it also shows that like what really matters is the meaning that we can make in life, and like that's what'll get you through. You know.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, you know, like I came to magical practice and witchcraft and all that in the early 90s, kind of pre-craft, like when I started college. And, there was the craft wave of witches from the 90s. And then there was this lull, and now there's this current, like, I think largely social media driven to some extent, like, and cultural, we have witches on movies and television and all that again. But like, for those of us who lived through both those things, we were also here in the middle. So we know that like things happened in between. But it's an interesting thing. And, somewhere someone is probably writing their dissertation on this very topic right now. So I imagine. So.
Yep.
So what's next for you for books and writing and all of that good stuff? What's coming up? You mentioned the Ravens.
I'm really excited about the next book, which is again a continuation of this like move away from just writing scholastically, should we say, rather than academically, about moving from a straight up history of early modern astrology and magic with starry rubric to a study of a 16th century grimoire and its scrying record. It's kind of behind the scenes things with an excellent book of the art of magic, looking at actual cultus and practice of devotion to the three magi in that book. And as we talked about, the Art of Bryn's Mirror of Four Kings being more about like, hey, here's what I actually did, a little bit at least. Here's what you might find helpful about this. The next book is literally a book of spells. I haven't really done one of those before. So it's called Nazarth. It's an angelical psalter of prayers for geomancy. And so I've constructed and received and kind of experimented with 19 new prayers, calls, charms, invocations using the angelical speech that was received by Dr. John Dee and some squires, including Edward Kelly. And so it's using the ritual language of the angels rather than any of the formal things that get called Enochian systems, whether the Heptarchia or Liga Logoth or Geberthra or any of those kinds of deals, and just using the language in order to, as a ritual language for working geomancy, which is the main divination system I use, European Renaissance geomancy, which comes out of Arabic al-Ramal. My accent's terrible. Comes out of the cutting or the marking of sand, or the science of sand. So a very particular computational form of sortilege that gets very astrologized. That's a word. In Europe from somewhere between the 10th and 11th century and the 16th. And then explodes in popularity in the 16th and 17th centuries, and then becomes a victim of its own success by the 18th century, that people are writing pulpier and pulpier, shorter and shorter breakdowns, dummies' guides to the dummies' guide to the dummies' guide, until a complicated and nuanced system of sortilege, utilizing an awful lot of astrological grammar and language, becomes reduced down to a set of like lookup tables, basically. And so by the 19th century, no one's practicing geomancy anymore, really. Very few people, at least, other than cunning folk, funnily enough, because it is kind of a dirt astrology, and we are dirt sorcerers very often, but varying shades. I say that proudly. So what I did was develop a set of calls for stirring the virtues and spirits that cohere around the 16 answer figures of geomancy. Geomancy, the form I'm talking about, looks a little bit like a travel I Ching. It's made of these 16 figures, of these binary 4-bit figures of like the I Ching's broken or unbroken lines, single or double dotted points. And so there are 16 different answers or figures that geomancy can pronounce on things. They're assigned to elements and to the 7 planets. And we also employ a bunch of other tools from astrology. And so these calls were written and experimented with in the angelical language, going through the calls and things, and cohering them around stirring whatever answer came up for remediating. So if the divination, I'm very into magical remediation outside of just saying like, oh, there's all the towers, good luck with that, right? And being like, what can we do about this? Can we find anything useful for the tower to do? Do you need anything destroying right now? Like, do you have like a terrible addiction that you want to get rid of? Like, this could be how do you make this catastrophe work for you, right? How do we get behind the wheel of this pattern of energy that divination is showing, rather than getting hit by the car of it as we're crossing the road? And so these calls became a way of stirring the virtues and spirits attached to the various answers, as well as for opening divination, closing divination, and also dealing with some of the problems that can halt a chart. Geomancy has a bunch of rules around not every chart is good to read every time. And sometimes there are even early warning systems that say, right now, you're going to get bad data for various reasons, which could be anything from the star weather is messy and avoid it, to the client is lying to you. They don't have a sister at all, when they're asking about their sister, like that kind of stuff can come up. And so I have taken one obscure early modern system and mashed it into another early modern system. That's apparently what I do.
Right, but that works. So, from the list that we have a last question where I roll a die, funny enough, with our D&D conversation. But before we get to that, would you like to tell people where they can find you and what you have coming up on the horizon? I told you before, this will probably air in September. So
Sure, yeah. So people can find me on my incredibly imaginatively titled website, which is my name, alexandercummins.com. You can find my publications and blogging, and also a bunch of like class recordings and hopefully course archives soon as well. Those need to get up there. I have a bunch of classes that I've taught and have the recordings of that I'm in the process of moving posts for and things. But in the meantime, clients and students and people interested are welcome to drop me an email at consultantsorcerer@gmail.com and talk to me if they're interested in any of this material. I take private bookings and readings and things like that. And I'll be continuing to teach classes and things online. People can get hold of me on, I think the link tree is the easiest way to do that. So I'm happy to include that as a list of upcoming classes and publications and things of that nature. Yeah.
And we'll make sure all that gets in the show notes so people can find that and find you. And I will do a testimonial that your classes are fantastic.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much. We have a lot of fun. I really appreciate you saying that you like how, making weird ideas accessible by scaffolding them with more contemporary things. I'm always terrified. I don't know if you ever watched the Michelin Web sketch show.
Yeah.
Sketch about a cool historian that used to be like edgy and like radical, and now is just ridiculous and is on television like sat in a tub of baked beans, and is like, and this is why the Tudors were so important, and I'm going to wave my hands like an idiot. I'm always wary of not doing that, of not being like, because like in contrast to supposedly in most states where in theory church and state are meant to be separated in schools, in most schools in the UK, unless they're explicitly a religious school of another denomination, you are encouraged, indeed it is insisted in some cases, that you have a broadly Christian message. So I also grew up with the deputy headmaster of assembly in school every morning doing that classic, like, I see that that the goalie of the English team let in a goal at the recent sports ball match. And this reminded me of our Lord Jesus Christ, like, who always saves. Like, I have seen people do that with a straight face for years.
Yeah.
And so I never want to do that, like, hey, kids, grimoires were the iPads of their day. Like, I don't want to patronize people like that, but I do think it is worth us sometimes taking ourselves a little more lightly so we can take the material a little more seriously.
Yeah. Well, I have never cringed or winced. So there you go. So you're doing good. Right. You're doing good so far.
I will crank out the dad jokes. We'll see what happens next. No, thank you. That's good. Appreciate that.
So I'm going to roll this lovely D&D die. And depending on what number I get, I will ask you a question about death, sex, religion, politics, or money. Those great things they're not supposed to talk about that Scorpios love to use as small talk. And if I roll a 6, you get to pick which question you would like.
Okay.
5, money.
Fun times.
So usually I ask this about writing, but I'm going to ask this about magic for you. So I'm going to change the question a little bit. Is there something as a consulting sorcerer you are absolutely not willing to do for free? Or is there something as a consulting sorcerer that you would absolutely not do for money?
So on the whole, most of my clients are people who are, I would say these days, most about half are people that are not in any huge problems, but are like, hey, I feel like I'm a little, not even stuck necessarily, like in a good place to work out what to do next in my spiritual practice. Like those are great readings because you can read on like, hey, what would be helpful for you to concentrate on? Let's help you make decisions about like, I don't know, planning how to get through all your unread books, like which are going to be most useful to which places you might want to go to, which planets and like virtues and spirits are going to be useful for you over the next month, like what can help you do your magic, what's going to like distract you, but those kinds of things. I would say another half of that half, like a quarter, are people with like a serious problem right now. Like, you know, a haunting or, you know, a land spirit that keeps eating their pets or, you know, things that start to get like kind of serious. And then I would say like a quarter of them are people who are having the worst time they've ever had in their lives, and are approaching like desperate, right? So what I will and won't do is very much dependent on what I can divine, often for myself, about what's helpful to do. An awful lot of my work is like, yes, I can do a bunch of things, but you're going to need to speak to a lawyer first. You're going to need to speak to a doctor first. Because, you know, sure, magic can be super helpful for all sorts of things. But, you know, if you need to know the laws about how, you know, your ex can or can't take your kids across a border or something like that, then like I'm not the best person to speak to about that.
Right.
Like I do not have, you know, I have child protection training from the UK. I used to work in a nursery. Like I know something about that stuff, and I can certainly put people in touch with people that know more. But like often I am not. Often my job is helping someone triage in a nightmare scenario, like what order they need to seek different kinds of help in. That said, I've been asked to do a bunch of things that I was like, no, I would do that for no sum of money. I know you feel desperate right now, but that is not a thing that is going to make you. A lot of my work is about helping people understand what is doable and not doable to expect from a magical worker. I think about this. I talk about this a fair bit with my dear friend and colleague, Professor Charles Porterfield, who's an Old Testament conjure doctor down in Texas. And, you know, we both lament that like it would be nice if people knew enough about our work, if we were comparable to plumbers. Where like, I don't know how to plumb my house, but I know what a plumber is roughly going to do when they turn up. I know it would be weird if they did in my front room. Like if the plumber gets naked and is like, this is normal plumbing. Like, I'm gonna be like, I don't think it is, you know? No. Whereas like people have less, generally, most Western white people, let's be honest, have less of a, what I call like a magical cultural literacy of knowing what they can and can't expect. And so a lot of my work would also be way more profitable if I wasn't so hung up on ethics, right? if you know, that a lot of my work is turning down people that want to give me a bunch of money for something that I don't think is particularly doable or ethical as well. I could take this in a very dark place in terms of the things that people have asked if I would do that I will not do. In comparison, like if there are kids involved in a thing, I generally have a tendency to like not charge people for work that needs doing to look after kids as best I can, which is often helping them do a bunch of other things and opening roads so that they get a better lawyer or like, a good night's sleep so that they can deal with whatever else it is. There's a lot of auxiliary work. Occasionally it is exactly the like, no, actually doing this magic first is the best thing to do. But yeah, it very much depends. It very much depends. I don't like, again, not to out myself, I'm not a huge fan. I work with an awful lot of unclean spirits. I have a background in working Galicia and the spicier side of grimoires. I don't necessarily enjoy doing a lot of like, getting out the old murder stick and stuff. Like it doesn't feel good to me. I would rather do like work of amity and helping people step into honest and open communication about things. Like that's not always doable. Sometimes, someone's got to go in some way. Someone's got to be removed from a situation or protected but again, I would rather do the classic is like, why kill your boss when you can get them promoted to a different division where they're happier and make everyone else happier? Like there's a net win here. How can I lazily do the most good? Right. And often, usually that's not just, that person needs, to be banished or bound or to be sent insane or something.
Yeah. Don't always go with the nuclear option first.
Exactly. So again, helping people de-escalate and work out what to do when they don't know what to do is the main thing. And then it depends.
Yeah, I think what you said about like cultural literacy around magic, like the thing that immediately came to mind, and funnily enough, is the scene in Practical Magic when the woman comes to the aunts and wants this man to fall in love with her who's married. And they're like, you don't want this. You really don't want this. You don't want this. But then they do it and it ruins her life. And, I won't go into detail because if people haven't read it, they need to read it because it is a great book. And the movie is very different. I always try and warn people the movie is very different than the book. But it's not the tagline for my writing business is magic is real, but it isn't always pretty. But sometimes it can't be pretty, but that doesn't mean that's the first option.
Right. Again, people get very chest puffy about cursing and counter cursing and things like that. And again, I think if you compare it to, if you saw someone bragging about wandering around punching people in the back of the head, in the way that some people brag about cursing, would you want to hang out with them, let alone like learn from them or like trust them around vulnerable people, Again, thinking about this as growing up doing a lot of martial arts, having a concept of how do we learn to utilize this stuff helpfully. Most folk magicians have a root of magic itself being pretty amoral and being a technology that can be employed to do great harm or great good. And sometimes indeed the medicine is the poison, and sometimes the poison is the medicine, 'tis dosage that makes it so and all that business. Right. And literally, again, humoral theory wise, knowing how to rebalance something, knowing when someone is running too hot and needs to be cooled, knowing when they're running too wet and need to be dried, like those are absolutely the same mechanics of action that can, if you can rebalance, you can unbalance, right? And so there, I don't just think it's a thing that witches like to say, that to know how to heal is to know how to harm, etc. The bane and the blessing and all that kind of business, because health is good equilibrium and dynamic equilibrium at that, then like to push the scales is also to know how to like send them wacky. Right. And so it's again, when we treat it as a responsibility to step into, then the world ends up looking a lot more alive, I think.
Yeah. Well, that is an excellent place, I think, for us to end things. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so glad this worked out. And
thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been great.
Good. And I will see you in your next class, probably.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. That's very kind indeed. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about writing and books and things. It's often the kind of thing that I end up, rambling to other frustrated writers about at the pub and things. So it's nice to be able to compare notes as well. Thank you for
you come
for
to
sharing.
a safe place.
It's a safe place. It's a safe place. Good.